It's Wednesday. It's July 24th. I'm Andrew Hawthorne, and welcome to The Signal. This is our annual Sumer Reads show, and once again, it's all Epic of Gilgamesh. Oh, no, wait. Oh, that's a typo. It's the Summer Reads show. We're talking beach reads, airport thrillers, and revisited classics. We're talking to those that know best, local publishers, librarians, and readers. And we want to hear from you, too. What are you reading out there? Novels, poetry, comics? Lay it on me. We want to hear all about it. 722-7111 or 1-800-563-8255. You can also text, and I can read out your comment. 709-327-8206 or email us at thesignal@cbc.ca. Let me introduce our guests now. Joining me here in the studio, we've got regional librarian Emma Craig. Hello, Emma.
Hello, Andrew. Thanks for having me on the show.
Welcome back. President of Flanker Press, Jerry Cranford. Hello, Jerry.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
And, of course, writer and sales associate from Running the Goat, Kristen Stocks-Heath. Hello, Kristen.
Hello.
Welcome back. All right, around the horn first, I want to know, what is everybody reading? What's a book recently that you're really excited about? Kristen.
So Running the Goat has a local bookstore just about 40 minutes outside of the city, and we have a really wide array of titles that have been coming in and out of the shop. A few of my personal favorites from the store include Vigil by Susie Taylor, Soft Serve by Allison Graves, and Cocktail by Lisa Alward.
Are you excited about any of those particularly? Have you read any of those yet yourself, or are people...
I have. So I've recently finished Vigil, Soft Serve, and Cocktail.
You read them all?
I've read them all. I love
gosh.
them. They're beautiful titles.
Yeah.
So they all have sort of elements of short story collections within them.
Okay.
But Susie Taylor's title, Vigil, is a really lovely, that's with standalone stories, but it's also functions as a chapter book, and it's beautifully written.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, Jerry, how about you? Anything you're reading that's really got you excited for the summer?
Well, first of all, I want to say happy birthday to author Karen Lundy. Is that okay?
Absolutely. Happy birthday, Karen. Watch the table there.
Yeah. Sorry.
Happy birthday out there, Karen. What's on the go?
Okay, so we've got, this has been a busy year for us. We've got novels, we've got historical fiction. Helen C. Escott's brand new book, We Will Meet Again, is beautifully written. It's strong female characters, female character led completely. 4 generations, a great grandmother, and her daughter, granddaughter, and great granddaughter. They all converge to move the matriarch to a new home, a retirement community, if you will.
Okay.
And as they're unpacking and packing boxes and things, lots of secrets come to light. And what does come to light most of all, though, is their interactions with each other over the years and this generational trauma that comes to light. And it's they bring a lot of issues to the table. And I won't say whether or not they will resolve them at the end. I'll let you read the book.
This is a spoiler-free show.
Spoiler-free, absolutely. Yeah. We can't give that away because then you wouldn't buy the book. So we have Misfortune Bay as well. And this is, again, beautifully written by first-time author Alex Hickey from St. Jack's. And he's really one to watch for. I've got his next one signed up for next year, which is beautiful. Thumbs up. And it's about the loss of the albatross, which was tragically struck in the middle of the night. And there were a couple of lives lost. But he talks about the events surrounding it and that led up to the collision, because this was in wartime, First World War, Newfoundland, and the sort of system of government and the welfare officer who was going around at the time collecting money for people to support the war effort, and convergence of events just sort of led to this particular tragedy. So Alex Hickey, he's one to watch for. And this is
kind of a nonfiction book, kind of like a Winter's Tale or what have you?
It's nonfiction, but he's got it's historical fiction, right? Because he tells it through the narration of an Englishman who visited, and it's sort of like a Call Me Ishmael kind of start.
Okay, sure,
right?
yeah.
Is really cool. Like, he's a great writer. I can't say enough good things about him. Mitchell D. King, Dirty Little Secrets. Mitchell's a lawyer at a very high-profile law firm, and the main character in this one is a closet. There's no way around it. Alcoholic.
All right.
Hiding booze in thermoses at meetings and things like this. And so we follow his misadventures, if you will. One book that I don't have here, but is on its way, and I really want to highlight the talent of this writer. You might have read Hunting Helena by Natalie Carter-Giles, which we published last year. Well, she has got what's going to be the first in a series of crime dramas written, and this one's called Next to Die, and it's about a serial killer running amok in St. John's, modern day, and it's a meteor. It's incredible. She is a fantastic talent. I just can't wait for this one to come out. And It's going to press this Friday. It's going to be out on September 6th.
What's the title again?
Next to Die.
Next to Die.
And she's got a male and female RCMP officer partners who Sonny and Roscoe are their names. And this is on the cover. It says a Sonny and Roscoe thriller. So there's going to be more with these two. But Natalie just blew me away with this one. Hunting Helena was brilliant, and this one just takes it to the next level.
Amazing.
Yep.
Emma, let's talk to the experts here. What are you reading that's really exciting you right now?
Well, I had a bit of an identity crisis this summer.
Oh, no.
I went into a bit of a slump, but I found a way to get out of it was actually diving into historical fiction. So I did a bit of an escapism by going back to other time periods. So one book that came out this year that I think is like a little hidden treasure among Atlantic Canada is A Sweet Sting of Salt by Rose Sunderland.
Okay.
It takes place on, I believe it's 17th century Nova Scotia, and has to do with midwives and the myths around Selkies, if you're familiar with them, with Celtic folklore. So lots of buzzwords that I found very fascinating. My great-grandmother was a midwife in Nova Scotia.
I thought you were going to say she was a Selkie.
No. Well, I wouldn't be in the studio then. I'd be living in the ocean.
Not that we know.
So I really enjoyed that book, and I got that through our Libby app, so that was even better, borrowing from our libraries. I actually just last night finished Bright Young Woman by Jessica Knoll. So a bit of a darker, more modern day one. It centers around the Ted Bundy murders, but definitely was a very fascinating read, and I'm kind of keeping up with that historical fiction kick, I think, for the rest of the summer. I just had another library loan come in for Slewfoot, Tale of Bewitchery by Brom, a single name author, which was very mysterious and interesting to me. And basically it takes place in a Puritan colony and has to do with witches and stuff. So I'm really...
Really?
Yeah, I'm
Brom,
really...
of course, is the antagonist of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow as well, also.
Oh, I don't know much about this author. This book was recommended to me by another library friend. And I'm very excited to dive into it because, like I said, I think I'm having a historical fiction time-traveling summer. I'm going back to other times. I'm hoping... Well, I mean, with the last book, it had to do with a serial killer, and now I'm going to the witch hunt. So I might need some lighter historical fiction reads if anybody's calling in today and wants to send me any.
Well, I don't know if it's lighter, but if we're talking historical fiction, I can't but recommend Master and Commander by Patrick O'Brien.
Yes,
Except for that,
course.
then you have 21 books to read through if you want to get through the series. But they're real good, guys. All right. Well, you'll have to let me know about that Brom book and let me know if it's Ichabod Crane Erasure or how we're doing with that one. I'm going to throw in a book. I got to throw in some comics. You know me. So I'm going to talk about A Guest in the House by M. Carroll. Have you read that one?
I actually read that, I believe, in January when it came out. I'm a big fan of Emily Carroll. I've read her short story collections. I've read her webcomics. I adored A Guest in the House. So
Yep.
Yeah.
It just won the Doug Wright Award this year, which is, the Canadian Comics Oscars. So it won Best Book of the Year. It's also on the LA Times Book Prize, the New York Times Notable Book. It's a story about a woman kind of trying to get used to a new family. She's just married a widower, but she begins to suspect that there's more to what happened to the original family than she's been told, and also perhaps that the house is haunted. That's a really great book out there you can check out as well. I just wanted to go around the horn as well and say, talk about how you get into a book, what attracts you to a book, what is getting you into something that you might want to read for the summer. Maybe Emma, we'll start with you. What makes you want to read a particular book?
I really did ponder about this because I describe myself as a mood reader, which means my interests and what I'm interested in reading really depends on the time of year, what I've been interested in at the time. So my interests actually really vary throughout the year and throughout my reading choices. I like to say that I'm a perpetually online person when it comes to the book community, very involved with Bookstagram and Book Talk. So I definitely pull there for recommendations, pull from my online community as well as my friends. I really pay attention to reviews as well. That being said, I definitely have very loyal to the authors that I do like. So people like V.E. Schwab, Aaron Craig, Lee Bardugo, Aidan Thomas, Ava Reed, R.F. Kuang. They're all like my books that they write books that I often give 5 stars to. So they're authors I always keep an eye out throughout the year. But that being said, I tend to see what's interesting, pay attention to the conversations going on, either from my friends at work. I'm very fortunate to work in a workplace where people are talking about books all the time, so it's a great place to pick up recommendations. But it's really hard for me to explain my thought process because I do find I'm a very fluid person when it comes to picking books that I'm interested in reading.
You're across the board on the books.
I'm across the board. Like I said, I'm in a historical fiction thing right now. I might dive back more into fantasy once fall hits, but I can't really judge until I reach there.
Is there anything you avoid? No judgment if there's a genre that you're not into. You're not reading a lot of cookbooks or something?
I actually have been trying to read more cookbooks, mostly because I'm not much of a cook, so I enjoy the idea of having recipes written out. I will say I wish I read more contemporary. That's a genre I wish I read more. Also, mystery thrillers in general, like hearing you talk about that earlier with all the different flanker books. It's a genre that I know I enjoy. Like, I remember enjoying certain mystery thriller books, but then when it actually comes down to me picking a book, I completely forget until I eventually pick one up again.
Yeah, when Jerry said Agatha Christie style, he hooked me already. You're listening to The Signal. My name's Andrew Hawthorne. We're talking about books, and you can talk about books. I'm not going to get in your way. You can give us a call, 722-7111, 1-800-563-8255. Or if you don't want to come on the show, I can read it out for you. I can read it in a funny voice if you like. You just let me know which one, 709-327-8206. Jerry, what attracts you to a book that you're going to read? If you even have time to read books in the midst of putting out all the books.
I love reading. I mean, I've been a reader since I was 7, 8 years old. I was the kid in the library, reading the fantasy novels by, Alexander Lloyd or Lloyd
Alexander. Heck yeah, Lloyd Alexander, the Prydain Chronicles.
The Black Cauldron,
Absolutely.
If you like fantasy books as well, just Emma, I can't recommend enough. David Eddings was life-changing for me.
The Belgariad?
Oh, yeah. And the Malloreon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, like Emma, I do follow certain authors loyally, the Stephen Kings, the Lee Childs, but, I'm also drawn to, and we've published quite a few of these mysteries, thrillers, / murder mysteries, and doggone it, of all the mysteries, the whodunits that I've published, this is our 30th year, by the way.
Congrats.
Thank you.
You don't look a day over 29.
Oh, hey, not bad. Thank you. Must be the new haircut.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have yet to figure out the whodunit part. I have yet to read a book like this, and that attracts me. If
you don't know where it's going.
If it stumps me, and I had no idea where it was going, the Emily Hiptich thrillers, Ida Linehan Young, and Helen Escott again. I'm like, okay, this, when I get to the end and I say, oh my God, how did they do that? I get a little thrill, a little dopamine rush or something, saying, okay, readers are going to love this, right? And Natalie Carter-Giles, another one, she just keeps you going, right? So I'm drawn to books like that take you on a journey in a roundabout and get back to the focal point of the whodunit part, and then throw you for a loop right at the end. That's what makes this exciting for me.
A twisty journey.
Twisty journey. I
Twisty
like it.
journeys are good.
Yep.
Christina, what are you looking for in a book? What is it? You're walking down. There's a bookshelf there. And you're like, that's the one.
That is an excellent question. I find often for me the attraction to it can be, again, like Emma mentioned, really dependent on mood and what you're going through at that particular moment and what your interests are. Personally, for me, I love characters. I love the connection a reader builds as they move along a story. And you kind of find that heart. And there's something so neat about that, and like being within a world or a poem or, an experience and kind of connecting with that and seeing the humanity there. I just love that. I think, in terms of children's books, like some of our recent releases that we've had with Running the Goat now, My Bunny Lies Over the Ocean is this fabulous and really funny story.
It's such a great title.
Oh,
too.
and it's sung to the tune of My Bonnie. And I'll spare the listeners my voice, but it's really, really fun to read out loud and sing to your kids. And the illustrations are so fun every time. Every time you look at a new page, you're going to find something new. So, yeah, I think
like a potentially really great story time book for the library.
Yes.
We always love books like that with the rhyming, the singing. It's the best way to get kids involved.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, I think that would be a great fit. I'll talk to you after.
We're making connections here on the Signal today. What's your favorite genre of book? Do you have a favorite genre?
Yes. No, I can't say that. I really.
No, you're allowed to say it. It's okay.
I don't know. I have a.
Kristen,
I have a.
I'm
real,
not gonna tell the other
yeah,
genres.
Don't tell anyone else. There's no one listening. It's okay. I love fiction. I love literary fiction. I love essay collections, like personal explorations of like memoir and, experiences and getting to know someone in a new way, in a new light. And those titles I mentioned earlier that are at the shop now are an excellent fit for that. As you mentioned, The Adversary by Michael Crummy is another just brilliant book.
For sure.
That's what I love.
Amazing. And what's your favorite genre? We've talked a little bit about genre. Right now, you're in a historical fiction thing.
I'm in my historical fiction era, as the kids are saying. But I will say my home genre, the genre where I definitely read the most, a little guiltily, is fantasy. I do love fantasy. I try to slip in some science fiction as well, because that's another genre I feel really at home at. But I think if I was to do like a stats throughout the year of what I read the most of, it would probably be fantasy. And
you don't have to feel guilty about this. This is a pro-fantasy space.
Yes, I have realized this is a pro-fantasy space, which is great. But I think it's me trying to diversify my reading habits by trying out different authors. But even then, when I listed out all my favorite authors, they're all fantasy authors.
What are some of those? What are some of your favorite fantasy authors specifically?
Number one is V.E. Schwab. So she's the book she's most famous for at this point is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. But she has some great fantasy series. Her magnum opus, in my opinion, is the A Darker Shade of Magic series, which is how I got into her. That being said, I also love Leigh Bardugo. She's popular for the Shadow and Bone series. So if you ever watch the Netflix show, the Grishaverse Shadow and Bone book show, that's based on her series. And she just released a book this year called The Familiar. And I think it might be my book of the year.
Wow.
And it's another historical fiction book, but it takes place in like Elizabethan era Spain and has to do with this witch and her kind of infiltrating the Spanish court. It has a lot to do with like the relations between Spain and England at the time, if you're familiar like with those kind of history. And I've told many people I got to read it while on vacation on a beach, so I got to really dive into the book and devour it, basically. I think it might be my book of the year, to be honest.
Wow. All right, strong recommendation. Jerry, we've talked a bit about fantasy and mystery already.
Yeah.
Do you have a preference of genre? At Flanker, you're publishing all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I love especially when a new author comes to us with a murder mystery, or it doesn't even have to be a murder mystery, but fiction. For instance, Carolyn Morgan, author of Unveiled and Art Love Forgery. She's got a new one coming out called Secrets Between an Ocean and a Sea. I want to say ocean and a pond because I have a new cabin on Ocean Pond. Anyway, so this is a really nice story about a lady who's an artist, much like Carolyn herself. So I guess it's one of those write what you know kind of deals.
Fair.
She travels a lot to Jamaica, and while she's over there, she notices in an art gallery a painting that she could have sworn that her uncle, her long-deceased uncle who visited Jamaica a lot, she could have sworn that she saw the same painting hanging in his home back in Newfoundland. So when she starts to inquire about it, some really deep family secrets start to come to light, and she notices lots of connections between herself and the gallery owner, and that's all I can say, really. It's worth a read. It's fantastic.
Amazing. What was the title again?
Secrets Between an Ocean and a Sea.
Secrets Between an Ocean
So
and a
the
Sea.
Atlantic Sea and the Caribbean Sea. Yeah.
All right. If you've got any recommendations, we'd love to hear. I've got one coming in here now, and you can join in as well. Gary just wrote in and said that he's been reading a book called Violence in the Model City by Sidney Fine. Has anybody heard of that one? That's a book to do with the July 1967 riots in Detroit City. Wow. He says it's the same event that Gordon Lightfoot based the song Black Day in July on, a song that was banned on several American radio stations because of its subject matter. Violence in the Model City by Sidney Fine is a recommendation for Gary. If you have any recommendations or if you have any questions for our esteemed panel here, 722-7111 or 1-800-563-8255. Or you can text us because we're in the age of the information superhighway. You can do whatever you want, and it'll probably get to us one way or another. 709-327-8206 or email the signal at cbc.ca. Emma, what are other people other than us? I mean, I know our opinion is better than most, but what are people reading this summer that you're seeing at the library?
Well, I had a good poll from the different library staff just to get a bit of feedback on what they're seeing our patrons taking out, and it's definitely a wide market. I always notice this time of year we get kind of the beach reads being checked out.
Absolutely.
So these are books like Carly Fortune, The Summer Will Be Different, and Meet Me at the Lake, as we were discussing earlier off the air that Carly Fortune was up for Canada Reads this year. So she's having a really big explosion with her popularity. Also, Emily Henry, who I consider the queen of the beach read. She just released a book this year called Funny Story, and that seems to be going off our shelves really quickly here at the library. Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. I believe this is a first-time debut novel for this woman, and she's doing really well, a lot of checkouts. We mentioned Stephen King earlier. His new short story collection is also circulating a lot, we've noticed, as well as Riley Sager's book, Middle of the Night. I did want to mention that our most held item, so I had one of our librarians look into what is our most requested book of the summer, and it appears to be, at this point of recording, The Women by Kristen Hanna. So Kristen Hanna is a name we recognize a lot in the library. She publishes some great books, kind of divided between different genres, I believe, but this one I think is a historical fiction book, and it has over 200 requests in our library system.
200 requests for The Women. What is powering that, do you think?
I do really think it's just her popularity. There's certain authors within my industry that we definitely consider library popular authors. So they're the books that we often see being taken off the shelves. Like people are already placing holds as soon as they see that we've put something up for order. And I think Kristen Hanna has that bit of popularity. She's a great author. She does great for herself with contemporary and historical fiction books. And I think her books seem to really appeal to a wide audience. I think you could find a Kristen Hanna book that appeals to anyone.
Wow.
is what we would consider in the industry the critical mass.
The critical mass, I know, 200 holds has got to be pretty critical.
Oh, and I might as well plug, too, some Newfoundland books, because obviously it's always good to mention what's been popular.
Always.
So the big ones, of course, are The Adversary by Michael Crummy, which was our big choice for Love Our Local Authors Award this year at the libraries, as well as Rage the Night by Donna Morrissey.
Okay, yeah, and I think Christina, you mentioned the Michael Crummy book a little earlier, did you not?
Yes,
so
yeah.
For those who don't know, what is The Adversary about?
So The Adversary is about a relationship between a brother and sister, and it's based in early Newfoundland. And it's just, I mean, it's Michael Crummy. It's stunningly written. There's a lot of conflict. I believe Michael referred to it as sort of I can't remember now, Cain and Abel story when he was referencing it. And it's, the imagery is stunning, and it's just the personal relationships that I was mentioning before being at the heart of the story. And I don't know, Emma, if you have anything you'd like to add. It's
just that I know I've been meaning to get into Michael Crummy. He's always on our shelves, so obviously I should really prioritize reading him. But he has a soft spot in my heart because he's one of my father's favorite Newfoundland authors. So I always love hearing about his new books. And he always gets one for at least birthday or Christmas or Father's Day. It was just his birthday on Monday, so happy birthday, Dad. And yeah.
Oh, happy birthday, Miss Dad.
And Michael Crummy is also his dad is from Buckens, which is my dad's growing up place as well.
It's a small community here in Newfoundland. We're all related somehow. You're not going to go wrong with Michael Crummy now.
Sure.
We've got another person writing in recommending author, Paul is recommending author Bob Abbott of St. John's, who recently published a book called Live. I'm not familiar with this one. It says it's a personal journey along with that of his family after receiving a terminal cancer diagnosis. He started writing the book in 2013. It's on Amazon and other places. Live by Bob Abbott. So that's what Paul is recommending. Recently, the New York Times published a list of the top 100 books of the century. We haven't had a lot of century yet. I guess we're almost a quarter of the way through, actually. Oh, gosh, that went by pretty quick. And a lot of books, you're going to recognize a lot of the books on this list as well. The reader's picks include books like Barbara Kingsolver's Demon Copperhead, topping that list, which is kind of a remix of David Copperfield in the American South. Some of the other stuff on that list, Kazuo Ishiguro's Never Let Me Go, Hilary Mantel's Wolf Hall, Cormac McCarthy's The Road, and Cavalier and Clay, Michael Chabon's Cavalier and Clay. What would you put on that list? So we've had 24 years of century. Hot seat, Christina. We've had 24 years of the 21st century. And what is just the best darn book that you've read that's come out this century so far?
Honestly, I loved February by Lisa Moore. I think it's a stunning title, and I think that should be on there.
What is it about February that
February
really
takes place after the Challenger went down, and it deals with one person's grief as they move through that. And it was kind of one of the first books that got me into writing when I started.
Really?
Yeah. So
Wow.
I would put that one on the list for sure.
There's a certain kind of art that, like, there's art that you read and they're like, wow, that's incredible. But there's also art that you experience that you're like, this inspires me to want to do that.
Yeah.
From a comics point of view, that's always been Calvin and Hobbes for me. For some reason, I always love the genius of Bill Watterson, but it's also like, this makes me want to create a comic or something like that. But yeah, a book that makes you want to write is a special kind of a book. Hey.
Yeah.
Jerry, what do you think about just the best book of the 21st century so far? What century are we in? 21? Yes.
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of biased.
You're allowed.
And rather, maybe self-serving. I don't know. But I think probably the best book I've read so far this century is The Woman in the Attic by Emily Heptich.
Sure.
It was just brilliant, unprecedented, and I was lucky enough to have published it, and everyone else. And I was very happy to learn that everyone else agreed with me that it was just an outstanding book.
Yeah, it blew up entirely. Hey.
Yeah, I met Emily for the first time at the 2019. pitched the publishers event at Writers NL. It was downtown in the Eastern Edge Gallery, and I met her there briefly, and she said that she had a manuscript she wanted to send my way. So I said, sure, go for it. And well, it was the one she pitched at that event, actually.
At their Pitch Wars event, right?
Yeah, and
that's incredible.
Yeah, and so I was really excited about it, and I said I'd really like to have a look at that, and told her so, in front of the crowd, and had to, look at all the other publishers there too, who were probably wanting a look as well. But luckily, she came to us, and lucky for me, and it's just taken off, and it's become an audiobook. It's won so many awards. It's been on bestseller lists. It's just incredible what a ride it's been. And her second book, dare I say, I liked even better, which was Alone on the Trail. She's just an incredible talent, a conscientious writer, a wordsmith, if you will, right? And that I do get excited when I stumble upon these wordsmiths,
Yeah, I want to give another shout out to Pitch Wars, because it's one of my favorite events of the year. And if you haven't gone to it, they usually stream it online as well, Writers NL. But it's Dragon's Den, but books, right? And every year it's absolutely fun and crazy. And our own Chrissy Holmes often hosts it as well. So plug for Pitch Wars. It's fun. Emma, no pressure. What's the best book of the year?
Of the 21st century?
Of the century, yeah.
Well, as a bookish person, of course, as soon as the list came out, I was like, oh, well, I need to come up with my own list. So I actually did already have something prepped.
Oh, absolutely.
So the two titles, I actually would like to mention two, a fiction and a nonfiction.
You can mention 5 if you want. I don't mind.
Oh my gosh. Well, now I might mention 5. The number one I think I had to pick, mostly because it's one of the books I've reread the most, and it is a fantasy book, so we're representing the fantasy genre in this list, is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern.
The Night Circus.
It's a beautiful book. It doesn't really have a time and place, but you can tell it's from maybe the turn of the century, early 1900, and has to do with these two battling magicians in this enchanted magical circus. And it's honestly just beautiful writing. And I like to pick it as a fall read. It's very cozy feeling, and the descriptions of if you've ever been to a circus or a carnival, kind of reactivating those nostalgia you have for those memories. So I think that's one of the books I've reread the most in my life, and it's
in your whole life.
Yeah, I think it's the one I've reread the most, and I don't reread books very often. I think it's because I have such a good memory that I just why would I reread it? I already know what happens. But
how many times have you reread it?
It's probably close to 4 or 5, and that's a lot for me. And I think the book originally came out around 2010, 2011, if I remember correctly.
Okay. Okay, before you get to the next book, what's the book you've read the most in your life, Christina? Have you ever repeated a book that you just and it could be when you were a kid. I'll start. Mine's The Iron Man by Ted Hughes. It was made into the movie The Iron Giant.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, that was absolutely my favorite book.
I didn't even know that was a book. Now I kind of want to find it.
It was a book. It was originally called The Iron Man. Okay. They changed it so that you wouldn't confuse it with Robert Downey Jr. when they made it into a movie. But the book is incredible. It's very different from the movie. Other than that, it's The Belgariad by David Eddings, which I've read
too.
3 or 4 times.
I did too.
Yeah.
And you know what? I think I'm due for another reread.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yep.
Christina, what book have you read the most frequently?
The most frequently, I mean, if we're reflecting to, children's books, I would say the first time I moved away, my mom gave me a recorded version of Love You Forever. And
oh my gosh, by Robert Munsch?
Yes, yeah. So I would say, writ large, probably statistically that one.
That's very fair.
From childhood to now.
My mom, if she's listening, I don't know. My mom still writes Love You Forever on every birthday card I've ever got because of that book.
It's really special.
Not because she loves me or anything, just because of that book. Yeah. Jerry, what's a book that you've reread the most?
The Belgariad. And the Malorian. I'm a big fan of these books that take you on journeys, and there's not much of a longer journey than 10 books.
It's a lot of books,
and each one is a journey in itself, and the dialogue is just so rich and funny.
And those are books based really on, like you were mentioning, Christina, the character, like real people that you want to relate to, and that's what's great about those books because it is your fantasy we're going on a fetch quest, we got to find a thing series on its face. What's fun about those is those characters are characters you like.
I mean, it's so, it just takes you by surprise too. You know, like in book 2, Beric turns into a bear, right? And
he's a big Viking guy.
Yeah, he's a big Viking guy, and he turns into a bear, and he doesn't even realize that he can do this. And then when he comes out, he's like, he's distraught, he's depressed, he's like, oh my God, I want to do away with myself. And Paul Guerra,
the sorceress,
says, oh, grow up. And, you know, it's
get
just...
over the bear thing.
It's like stuff you don't expect from a fantasy novel, but just keeps you going and laughing and cheering for these characters. So, I mean, hands down. You know, R.A. Salvatore is another one. I do like...
Classic.
I do like his... funny, but I actually ended up somehow in a Twitter back and forth between R.A. Salvatore and Ed Greenwood, the Elminster from... Forgotten Realms.
Okay.
And, you know, Ed Greenwood's telling me, oh, yeah, I wrote on the Newfie Bullet back in the 1960s. And I'm like, what is happening right now?
Okay.
So, anyway, yeah, the fantasy genre will always have a special place in my heart.
Absolutely. All right, Emma, we're back to you.
Well, I did want to plug, because I realized after I said that was the book I've read the most, it's actually tied with another book series, the His Dark Materials series by Philip Pullman.
You know, I've never read that. I know it's supposed to be amazing, and it's supposed to be an answer to the Chronicles of Narnia in a way.
Yes, it's like I've heard it called the Atheist Chronicles of Narnia,
Right.
which is, I think Philip would secretly love that title for it. But yes, I originally read the book when I was around the same age as the protagonist, Lyra. And I reread the series probably about as many times as The Night Circus. And yeah, honestly, I would have put it on my list of the best books of the 21st century. But unfortunately, the first book was published in 1995, so it doesn't qualify.
It's as recent as 1995? I thought
The first book was published 1995, yeah.
Wow.
Because like I said, I did research once this list came out. I was like, well, I think I could come up with a better list.
Wow.
Unfortunately, I had to disqualify that one.
That is a massive series, though. Like, I do need to get to that.
And he's still writing books, so he's working on, it's like... it's not like his Dark Materials, but it's kind of basically set afterwards. So now it was really good enjoyment. I can't remember the name of the book now off the top of my head, but he's written a book and then Lyra's grown up. And at the time that I read it, I was the same age as Lyra again. And I remember telling people as I was reading it, it was like being... like reading the first book for the first time, like being the same age as her, and now I'm the same age as her again. And like that's just a really special moment. Like we talk about that a lot with big children's books, like you grow up with these books. And sometimes it's nice when the characters grow up with you. But yes, the other book I wanted to plug for 21st century best books is a Canadian one, and it's a memoir. It's We Have Always Been Here by Samra Habib.
Okay.
So it was also a Canada Reads winner, and it's a memoir that she wrote about growing up as a queer Muslim woman, child of immigrants in Toronto. And I actually listened to the audiobook of this. I think it was like I was going home for Christmas, and so obviously I needed something for airplanes and the airport. And I still remember like being in tears listening to the end because it just was very beautiful. And I'm not that would probably be a genre book I don't read a lot is memoirs. I love listening to audiobooks of memoirs. I think that's my favorite way to enjoy them now, and I think it's because of that book. And I think I wanted to plug that too, and I thought of this when you mentioned February. I felt like there was a lack of Canadian books on the 100 list.
Absolutely.
Like
We're going to get to that in a sec too. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, I think it was only like 5 Canadians, and 2 of them were Alice Munro. And I'm like, there's so many other books that could be on there.
Absolutely.
Like, I know that within the last 21st century, I mean, I'm an Atwood fan, so of course I'm going to plug her. Oryx and Crake came out. Like at the beginning of the 2000s. Like the fact that didn't make the list is a shame in my opinion.
Yanks, man. You can't do nothing with it. I don't know. A second ago, Jerry, you said, you didn't want to be self-serving talking about Emily Heptich. You can be self-serving. That's totally fun. And I wanted to bring up, speaking of self-serving, that on that top 100 book that didn't have enough Canadians, Stephen King put his own book on that list, 11/22/63, as one of the best books.
Yeah, that is a good book.
I did read that one. I would say it's one of my favorites, but not maybe the favorite of his.
He thinks it is.
Well, he spent years writing it.
Did he really?
Yeah. So I know this because when that book came out, I was in school and I did a book report on it. That was like decades in the making.
Wow.
Because he wanted to do so much research.
He started it in 63?
As a child.
Yeah.
Right.
This one's going to be great.
He basically wanted to make sure he researched it enough before he could act, because it's so detail oriented. It is a slog, but it's like a very good slog.
It's a good slog?
It is a good slog.
What does that mean?
It is.
In the sense that
It's like a nice hike through a marsh.
yeah. Well, you can see you can tell how much work he put into it. I think
Okay.
that's what I mean. Like, you read a book sometimes that's super long and you're like, oh, it doesn't need to be this long. But then with this one, at least when I read it, I found like, oh, of course it's this long, because he wants to make sure he's using all this research that he spent decades working
Sure.
on.
And you're like, good for you, Steve.
It's like, good job.
I remember in the author's note, he says that one of his sons, either Owen or Joe, helped him with the whole time travel thing, and told him, "Oh, sorry, Dad, you're gonna have to rewrite this part because in say the time travel canon that we all know, maybe that wouldn't work."
That wouldn't work.
So. Right, I remember that. That was quite good. But yeah, that was a fantastic book.
We're all fairly well educated on time travel now. Hey, we've had a few classics. So,
Yeah.
Speaking of
Not experienced though.
Speaking of, patting yourself on the back, it's allowed. We have a message from Barry Porter, who says, "Hi, Jerry."
Hi, Barry.
And also says his book, Adventures of a Lighthouse Keeper, is there. It came out 2 years ago, but he says it's a great read for locals. And it's his story of working in as a lighthouse keeper with or a light keeper with the Coast Guard for 23 years. Adventures of a Light Keeper. So
Such a nice guy too.
there you go. Is he good?
Yeah.
All right, I'll forgive him.
And a funny story with Barry, a friend of his in Twillingate, who owns Split Rock Brewery, created a beer and called it Flanker after us.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Does it taste like you guys? Or?
I'm not a drinker, but Dad likes it.
Okay. If your dad likes it,
It's
that's
a
enough for
smoky
me.
lager. I don't know.
That seems appropriate then.
Flankers from a fire, smoke.
Perfect. Emma, you mentioned there's not nearly enough Canadian content on that top 100 books, and I agree. So I want to talk about some Canadian, particularly I want to talk about local or small press books, because most of those books, of course, are from the big three publishers or whatever. I want to talk about books that are kind of under the radar on that. And also some of those books are Stephen King putting his own book on that list, of course. What are some great books, great local books? And they could be maybe genres that people don't always pay attention to. A lot of these are literary fiction books that are on this list. There are children's books that are classic books. Christina, what do you think? Should have been on the local or Canadian version of this list.
Yes. So, we're really lucky at the Goat to have a collection of just really incredible authors. 3 of my favorite chapter books by us include To See the Stars by Jan Andrews. There's The Degrees of Barley Lick by Susan Flanagan, and Urchin by Kate Story. All 3 of them are just brilliant. They're really, really wonderful. And in terms of illustrated titles for everything from early readers to middle readers, Laurie Duty's titles are so fun, and they really celebrate St. John's and the island, and her illustrations are colorful and fun. And she actually has 2 new titles coming out next week. So she has The Pup, which is about a young person who adopts a quote-unquote pup. But it turns out that pup can mean multiple things, and turns out that she has maybe adopted a seal.
I kind of want to adopt a seal now.
Oh, they're so sweet.
Just
Me
you
too.
mentioning that makes me kind of...
I own a Labrador, and it's essentially the same thing.
Very fair.
Exactly, yeah.
Very fair. You get it wet, basically indistinguishable.
Yeah, and then she also has Agnes's Garden coming out, which is a really wonderful story about one person who loves to garden, and she protects her space in very unique and interesting ways from invading pirates. So look forward to
Invading
that.
garden pirates?
Garden pirates, yes. They're in the ocean, but her garden's on the land.
Oh, gosh. Jerry, what's the best small press or Canadian book that should have been on the best 21st best books of the 21st century?
I'd be wary of a French translation of the book about a seal.
Yeah.
Anyhow, Andrew knows where I'm going with this. These I I want to say?
You already got off to a good start on this because you started with Emily Heptich a second ago.
Well, yeah, and there are so many talented writers here in this province, and there are a couple of really stand out with me. Jay McGraw,
Okay.
he wrote a book called "We'd Rather Fight Than Eat," and it's set in post-apocalyptic Newfoundland, more to the point, St. John's and Beckford, which is out Branch Way. And his writing style and talent and attention to detail and dialogue is just so darn sharp. And I just, I can't wait to read his next one because he's just a super talent. Also, Christopher Tobin wrote one called "What Happened to Maggie Dalton."
Sure, yeah.
And that is Christopher Tobin. You might know him as a stand-up comic, as a teacher, but what a gifted writer too. And this is sort of a Newfoundland take on The Exorcist. The young girl becomes possessed in Outport, Newfoundland, and but the way he's pieced this story together through diaries and news pieces, it's sort of reminiscent of Dracula or the other one, Frankenstein. The story is not
Epistolary novels, yeah.
Sorry?
Those are both epistolary novels. They're told with letters or newspaper clippings, so you get the sense this is a real thing, and this is just kind of an archive of what happened.
Right.
Okay.
Yes. That's exactly right. Interviews with the witnesses of this possession, this girl who was possessed, Maggie Dalton, and her father's diary takes up most of the book. Because it's a day by day run through of what's going on, levitating and demonic voices and speaking in tongues and the violence that ensues, and the priests who are involved and the child therapists who come into the house and are mystified, and it's a wild ride.
Wow, that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Emma, best local or Canadian books that should have been on that list?
As
You
I was
mentioned a couple,
pondering,
yeah.
I did think of a Canadian title that I really enjoyed, another nonfiction, and it is Desmond Cole's book, The Skin We're In, A Year of Black Resistance and Power. I think that book came out at a really pivotal time. If people aren't familiar with it, it's about the journalist Desmond Cole writing about his experience as a black man during the times where the George Floyd killing happened. And it's another one I listened to as an audiobook and thought was fantastic. And I think it's just a really important read. It's a really important read for Canadians because I think we always look at stuff going on in the States and we always think, oh, that couldn't be us, couldn't happen to us. But I think reading Desmond's book was like a really big eye-opener, at least for me at the time.
Yeah, and an important conversation. I remember when I was in elementary school and we learned about racism, we learned about the States. Mm-hmm. So in Canada, we love pointing at our southern neighbors and being like, look at these guys when we're doing all the same stuff up here. So important work.
I did think of a couple local books as well because I did want to represent, and obviously Hollow Bamboo comes to mind.
All right. I want to plug, we maybe mentioned it off mic. I want to plug Hollow Bamboo too, not just because Will Ping sits literally 2 feet in front of me and could hit me if I don't, but I read this on a beach and it's amazing. I love
it's
Hollow
amazing. And I think I remember saying to people after I'd read it, talking to people about it, that like I'd never read something that so perfectly encompassed the idea of like the being the child of immigrants, but also like the immigrant experience, especially here in Newfoundland. I think it's just like such a good, important read because of that. That being said, and it's
also just really fun.
It's fun. It's fun to read.
There's a squid in a bathtub in that book.
There's a squid in a bathtub.
I love his Instagram handle, Ping to the Pong.
Ping to the Pong. Yeah.
And obviously,
shout out Will Ping. He's right above us right now upstairs.
Cool.
And obviously, Kristen mentioned Urchin. I think we were actually asked by a group, I wish I could remember off the top of my head, for recommendations of YA, Canadian YA that librarians enjoyed over the year. And my choice was Urchin. I really wanted to plug the idea of like this fantasy novel set in St. John's, Newfoundland. It's historical fiction, but also this like queer coming of age book too. And I think that's something that checks a lot of boxes, but because it's local press, it's not as openly out there. So.
And it should be. I've heard a lot about Urchin and only ever great things. People are like, this is the book. And speaking of which, we have another email from Susan Flanagan, who's the author of The Degrees of Barley Lick and Supermarket Baby. And she sent me a whole list of books that she loves. Urchin on this under local. Urchin by Kate Story and The Good Women of Safe Harbor by Bobby French.
Yes.
Other top reads, The Lincoln Highway by Amor Tolls. I don't know how to pronounce that one, sorry. A Gentleman in Moscow, Remarkably Bright Creatures. She's got a whole list here that are amazing that she should check out. But again, another plug for Urchin there.
Hi, Susan.
I read Remarkably Bright Creatures last year, and as someone who's a big fan of octopuses and squids, if you love the stories of like cephalopod intelligence, highly recommend that book. It's also a great summer read because it takes place at an aquarium, and one of the main characters is an octopus. So if that's of interest to people, definitely recommend as well.
Amazing. We've only got a few minutes left. I want to talk about kids' books because it's an entirely new genre. We have a largely children's book publisher here with us. What's going on in kids' books that people should check out, especially locally? Christina.
Locally, I mean, as I mentioned, we do have those 2 titles coming out next week with Lori, and we're thrilled. I think that they're going to be a huge hit. In terms of other titles that we've shared lately, we have a whole host of really wonderful traditional Jack Tales by Andy Jones, and they're all available in ebook and audiobook format. So for those of you that are going on a road trip in the next little while, I would highly encourage you to check those out, as well as the audiobook format of Tom Dawes' Ghost Stories and Fairy Stories, which are a collection from across the island. It's such an exciting time for children's work, and we're so proud of the artwork and stories that are coming out of the press right now. So please come to our shop and check us out. And if you're unavailable to make it to Torres Cove, we are available at runningthegoat.com as well.
And of course, much is written about like the drop off over summer of kids not reading because they're out doing things. An audiobook is a great way to get around that, of course. But there's lots of great books coming out. Jerry, you've got a couple of kids' books there that you mentioned.
Yeah, I've got Judith M. Doucette's Papa and the Sacred Gitbu. This is about a Mi'kmaq culture and the significance of the eagle feather to the culture. It's fascinating and a lot of fun. And the reviews, I just read 2 new reviews of it like yesterday or the day before, and they're both extremely glowing reviews. So that's always nice to see. And she's got a great Mi'kmaq words in the story and translation, a glossary in the back with the pronunciation, right, which is really cool. I love this book. And it's an ongoing series, a Papa series. She has another one scheduled for next year.
It's wonderful.
First-time author, Dr. Gillian McCarthy, Nan's House. Beautiful, just the significance of growing up and what her Nan meant to her. And look at the illustrations. Aren't they just absolutely beautiful?
Wow.
By Corey Migeot from Gander. And Don Baker and Samantha Baker, a Newfoundland dog puppy, to be more specific.
Not a seal puppy. We've already
Not a
gone
seal
through this.
puppy, no. But we have a 4th that isn't out yet, which will be out in the fall, and this one is going to be strictly audiobook.
Okay.
And it's called, believe it or not, The Dicky Bird Dish. And it is a children's Christmas story, a beautiful Christmas story written by gentleman Ron Pollitt from New Harbor, Trinity Bay, long deceased. But he wrote these beautiful stories about home because he was living in New York City at the time as a printer, and he was just so homesick. So we sent this story to Gordon Pinsent, the beloved late Gordon Pinsent, and asked him, would he narrate it for us for a CD book combo? And he read the story, absolutely fell in love with it. So when he was down here in about 2010, he was filming an episode of Republic of Doyle on the CBC. And so we took him for an afternoon. He narrated the book, and we've just been kind of sitting on this for a while. And I thought, this is our 30th year. Let's make an audiobook out of this. So that's in the works right now. The Dicky Bird Dish by Ron Pollitt, narrated by Gordon Pinsent, will be out September 1st.
Amazing.
Yep.
Wow. If you want to revisit some Gordon Pinsent, that's a great place to start.
Yeah.
We've only got a minute left. Emma, kids' books that people are after at the library.
I mean, we're seeing a big explosion really in re-releases of popular series. So the big one's The Babysitter's Club.
Classic.
Classic series, but there's new series coming out now in the modern age for kids. And we're actually seeing that with a lot of series, mostly being turned into graphic novels. So
always love. And in fact, speaking of that, sorry to interrupt you, Emma, we're going to have some cartoonists on the show tomorrow. So come back when Adam is back. We're talking to cartoonists. And that is your episode of The Signal today. Thank you so much, Christina, Jerry, Emma, for joining us today. If you've been feverishly following along, trying to write down all these titles, don't worry. This episode is going to be on YouTube a little later. Hi, YouTube audience. And you can get them all there and pause at your leisure. Thank you very much for listening. My name's Andrew Hawthorne.